a song for you.
You're listening to Deep Purple Smoke on the Podcast. I will do one episode for each song the band recorded in the studio. However, this is a fan podcast and not band endorsed. It's more of a tribute to their long history, well beyond just the hits, and my way of giving something back to a band that has given so much to me. Let's dig in! Hello and welcome to another episode of Deep Purple Smoke on the Podcast. I am your host, Scott Haskin, and I have a giant in the podcasting world here to break down this epic Deep Purple track with me from the Deep Purple podcast themselves, Nathan Beaudry. Nathan, how are ya?
I'm doing great. How are you, Scott?
I'm doing fantastic, my friend. Thank you for joining me for this epic track. This is a big one.
Sure is. I've been looking forward to it.
Why? I mean, I could imagine why you picked this one, but why did you pick this one?
Because it's awesome. I think to me, it represents the first real foray into what Deep Purple could be. I think aside from Hush, all I had really heard to this point was Mark II stuff. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I might not have even known Hush was Mark II. I might have just been like, oh, Ian sounds different on that song or something, So when I heard this, I was just like, wow, this is different. It's a different direction. It's a turn, but I really loved where they were going with this.
Yeah, I agree. And I was just going to make some joke about how different Ian Gillan sounded when he hit puberty after, the difference between Hush and Mark II. But I think this is a lot of this for me is just the production and how full the song sounds. It's a pretty rich sounding song. And I would probably equate it on an epic scale to the way that people look at Stargazer from Rainbow. It's a big epic track. It is wall to wall sound. There's no space. It's relentless. Even with the stops, where they have these little reset points, it's a pretty relentless track, and the sound is full and huge, and it's energetic, and epic is really the best word I can use to describe it.
Yeah, totally. And I just love the I feel like in this song you're hearing the real beginnings, the birth of like the kind of neoclassical thing in metal. I don't typically call Deep Purple metal, but for all intents and purposes, I think this is kind of what started it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I definitely feel it was a new direction for them. It feels like they're like, okay, the last album we weren't getting along, we weren't talking, we've got new blood in the band, and you feel that oxygen in their veins. They're just on fire with this, and it's interesting and how it all came together. From what I remember hearing, and tell me if you just heard something different, but the feel of this song basically comes from the fact that Ian Pace was getting really impatient listening to them tune and go back and forth, and he just started playing drum solo through it, and they're like, hey, that's really good, just keep doing that.
I don't know if I heard that. The only thing that I can remember about it is that the riff was based on Fascinating Rhythm.
Oh yeah.
So it's it's a so it's got the same, like, from what I had heard, and it could have been true that Pace started playing that, and then I don't know if you've ever done it, like, where you try to write a song and you're like, I'm going to try to play something in the style of a song that I don't actually know. Mm-hmm. And then you start playing something and you're like, oh, sounds completely different. It could have been what Richie was doing. It's like, oh, this sounds like Fascinating Rhythm. Maybe it goes a little something like this. Ba-na-na-na-na, ba-na-na-na. And he's not far off, right? Because he's a great musician, but it's also in something entirely different in of itself.
Right. Yeah, that has happened to me. Actually, I was preparing a bunch of covers to go out and do like the coffee house circuit as a solo performer. And I started working on this one. I was just doing it from memory. I didn't even bother to listen to the song. I'm like, I know this. And I started working with it. I'm like, this is not that at all, but I really like what this is. And I turned that into another song.
Yeah, I think I'm sure a lot of songs are born that way.
Yeah. Yeah, like Black Knight.
Yeah, well, that's a little more than what we just said because you got all the notes right.
Well, I remember Roger telling that story in an interview one time, and he said, and I told Richie, I said, you can't do that. That's Ricky Nelson's Summertime. And he looks at me and he goes, I never heard that.
Yeah, yeah. I think it was I think Nick Simper had mentioned that too because he was dragging that out during Mark One,
Mm,
and Nick Simper was like, "You can't do that." It's like, "Well, I'm gonna do it anyway," and it's jokes on him because he did it, and there's never been any lawsuits.
right.
It's
Yeah.
crazy that you could. It's crazy you could get away with that, and yet there's some other people who do things that are so much less egregious, and
Mhm.
they still get claimed that they're stealing. Like what was it? The Robin Thicke song getting sued
Oh,
by
yeah.
Marvin Gaye's
Hmm.
estate, and it's like I get it, but he's going for the vibe of a Marvin Gaye song for sure. There's no doubt about it.
Hmm.
But to me, it just doesn't seem like they should have gotten this huge financial settlement for something that's more paying homage to a style than directly ripping anything off.
Right. And then you look at like the Stairway to Heaven case that went on for
Mm.
what, decades. And then you look at Black Knight and you go, how was this never a lawsuit? But I kind of think it maybe his estate or he was just like, that's awesome. I love that
Yeah,
they
yeah.
did that. I
I
love
mean,
that it was a hit. And that's awesome if something I wrote led to that.
well, it's like all the stuff with "It's a Beautiful Day." All that back and forth they had. It was all in good fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess it could go either way. But in the case of the Stairway to Heaven, that never went anywhere, right? With that,
Right.
I mean, I don't think it wasn't a successful lawsuit, and it had, from what I can hear, a very strong case to make.
Hmm. Yeah. And
But
it
I mean, who knows?
just finally got dismissed last year, I think
Yeah, it
after a
was
decade or
not
so.
too long ago.
Yeah, and then I guess Ed Sheeran's going through something similar right now. He just had a recent court case where he was accused of plagiarism. Like, what are we just supposed to stop putting out music because
Yeah.
it's like just because something exists doesn't mean you've heard it,
Mhm.
or you could have heard it and subconsciously. It's not like it's always that people go out of their way. But that's what I love about Richie. He's so candid about it. He's like, here's where I got this idea. Here's how I got the idea from Mandrake Root. A buddy of mine and I used to work on this, and I claimed it. And he's not shy about it. So it's almost like, hey, just come and take the money. you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, at a certain point, people have to receive their inspiration from somewhere, and as long as it's not egregious stealing, there's only so many combinations of notes. And I know
Right.
somebody was trying to. I read a couple of years ago that somebody was trying to use AI to basically write every conceivable possible melody and rhythm and all that sort
Mhm.
of stuff, and then just basically make it all um the word, for public domain.
Right.
So
Mhm.
basically say, okay, well, we have written every melody possible. Now it's all free, so do whatever you want to, which would probably break the entire music industry. But
Well, yeah, I mean, it's right. Getting the AI to spit that out would be one thing. Publishing that is another thing entirely. That's
I,
going to take some work.
I've probably told the story on my show before, but I had written like when I first started playing bass, I wrote this like little riff that was almost identical to Aqualung,
Mm,
but I had swear to you I had never heard the song. And it was different enough that it was like, no, I wasn't just remembering something. Like I'd never heard it.
right.
I played
Mhm.
it for my friend. He's like, "Oh, that's Aqualung." I'm like, "What's Aqualung?" he he told me, and I went, "Listen to it." It's like, ah, shit.
I
It's like
had
one of the
that.
first things I
Yeah.
ever wrote, and it's no longer valid.
I had that, except I did know the song. I just didn't realize it. And I'm writing.
Yeah,
It's
I've
like,
had that
man, this is
happen.
so good. And I'm listening back. I'm like, this is Disposable Heroes by Metallica.
Yep. I've done that plenty of times where I've recorded the whole song and everything. I'm like, oh, this is like not only this song, but it's like 90% this song. Why did I
Right.
do
But I have to think that we probably had heard the song at some point, maybe on the radio or somewhere,
Oh,
and
sure.
didn't know it or didn't remember it. It just like the subconscious thing. Because I think, okay, so did I really hear Deep Purple first in 1983 when Rainbow performed in Texas on MTV, or had I heard them and just that's a song, I didn't know who it was, never thought about it again, because I'm pretty sure I had heard Hush at some point, probably heard Smoke on the Water on the radio at some point, and just was like, that's a song. It's a cool song. Didn't think anything more of it. And then I hear it with Rainbow. I'm like, whoa, now I have a connection to something. Now I'm going to
Mhm.
dig into it more because I have a hard time believing I never heard Deep Purple before then. But, you're exposed to stuff, but you don't really pay attention to everything you're exposed to.
Right. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So before we get into the song, I have another question for you, Nate. Um, I'm curious because the way that you guys do your show is completely different from the way I do mine, and I love the way that we complement each other. We've actually had people comment on the fact that these are kind of cool companion shows to each other, which I'm
Sure.
completely flattered by because I love your show, I always have, except for in the beginning when I didn't. And and it's so funny to go back and listen to those episodes now. I'm like, how did I not like you guys from the beginning? Like those first couple episodes, I just was not into the show. I'm like, how did I not like you? It's so much fun. But
I mean, I think you need some time, and it's not always a lot of time to just get used to the format or the personalities. And
mhm,
then, like you said before, you'd listen to them talk about anything. You don't even care about the subject matter as
yeah,
much.
exactly. But my question for you is: so when you guys are doing your show and you're listening to the songs, you're kind of analyzing them and talking about different things that you hear. How do you feel doing this kind of a format where you're like really digging in and listening, doing a more critical listen than a more casual listen?
I love it. I like kind of being able to focus on one song a little more closely.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's a little easier to do a whole album format when you already know the album.
Uh,
Uh, but even if it's a song you don't know, like we've done a full episode on this song, isolated tracks, and
mhm.
then you hear things you've never heard before that way. So, but I've never done it in this format. So I like this format, and some of the shows I listen to also, several shows I listen to use a similar format to this.
Mhm.
Um, so I feel comfortable with it in that respect, that I feel like I've heard enough people do this sort of format that it's fun to just kind of stop the song, jump in, talk about what
Mhm.
you're hearing.
Yeah, and I've been amazed at how much I've discovered that I've never noticed before. And I think, as I've said on the show, part of that I think is that I'm listening through much better equipment. And I'm not those little tiny headphones we used to listen to that were basically like a wire with these orange cushions on our ears, and
Right,
you
those
know,
are terrible.
yeah, totally horrible sound, or the old
They weren't
curly
even
cord
comfortable
headphones.
too. They'd like
Oh
make your
God, no.
ears itchy, and yeah, it's
Yeah,
terrible.
yeah, and I mean, obviously, you're not going to hear the sonic quality that we can hear now on the equipment that we're listening on. So I think that's part of it. Obviously, we're sometimes listening to remastered versions where certain frequencies and instruments are brought out a little bit more. So we have a better advantage doing this now than we would have doing it back then. But
Sure.
you mentioned isolated tracks, and you guys did an isolated track episode on this very song, "Burn." And I have to say, I was blown away by some of the stuff I heard, like the grit in Glenn's bass that we hear in the isolated track that we don't really hear the depth of in this song.
Yeah, it's amazing how it's a song you've heard 1,000 times, and you start listening to the isolated tracks, and it can sound, when you hear Richie playing by himself or John playing by himself during most songs, that you have the ability to listen to those tracks by themselves.
Mhm.
Um, it is it's mind blowing how the two of them together have created something completely different. There's what Richie's playing, there's what John's playing, and then there's what they're playing together.
Right.
And it's very yeah, it's eye opening that they could create something like that where your brain doesn't even necessarily realize it's different instruments.
Exactly. And I wonder too, and I've speculated on this before, if some of that grit just gets blended in with the distortion we're getting from the guitar, the distortion we're getting from the organ, and we don't specifically hear it tied to the
Mhm.
bass because it just kind of all that distorted type sound just kind of blends in and just maybe just beefs it up a little bit because you got more low end. But I don't know, it's weird. And you and I are both audio engineers, and as an audio engineer, even I was surprised at the depth of it.
Well, it's amazing how many of the isolated bass tracks that I've listened to, particularly from this era, sound terrible.
Yeah.
Like like if you were soloing that and trying to get your bass sound down, you're like, no, this sucks. This is bad. We got to get a better bass tone. We got to isolate this somehow. We got to
Mm.
move the mic, do whatever to not get this horrible sound. But then when you listen to it with everything, it sounds great.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that in later years that I've learned is I always used to solo every track and make sure it sounds great by
Mhm.
itself. And then
Right.
you realize the whole track, that doesn't make the whole track necessarily sound good. So
Right.
sometimes you have to add the effects or the EQ and listen to everything together to say, oh, this bass sounds great. When you solo it, it sounds like garbage.
Yeah, and one of the mixing theories that I've heard over the years is to never do that, to never isolate
Yes.
something unless you're hearing a specific problem, like a frequency issue you're trying to hunt down, just for that very reason, because it kind of doesn't matter how it sounds on its own. It matters how it sounds in the mix. And I get that, but I'm like, okay, but does it sound okay? And I still check every track just the same, out of
Oh
habit.
yeah. But nobody would be satisfied with the isolated bass sound on this bass
Yeah.
if there was a point in this song where the bass had to do something solo, they would have had to EQ at least that part of it
Mhm.
or record it all together separate or in some other way because you'd be like, oh, this is terrible.
Yet when you listen to how gritty Roger's bass is on Fireball, it works.
Yep, totally.
And I don't understand that difference. I mean, it's a different style of music too, but it's just for some reason like it's okay for him to sound that heavy and cut through. And when if Glenn were to do it with the sound he's got, it doesn't work. It's really
Yep.
kind of weird. But did you ever do any live engineering like concerts?
A little bit. We did some live recordings in the studio where we it wasn't necessarily a concert, but we recorded it everything live together
Mhm.
in a way that we normally didn't, including vocals.
Oh
I think it's
wow.
pretty common to do without vocals, but
Mhm.
with vocals, it's a little more difficult.
Yeah.
Um, then yeah, I've done some live sound and stuff, but very, very limited as far as like anything I've recorded has generally been like, um, something like this, a recorder,
Mhm. Right.
in the
Yeah.
room, catching that sound, not necessarily off the board.
And don't watch that because Roger Glover spoke into that.
Yes. his his spit is still on this little
Oh, the
whatever
muff.
you
Yeah.
it's
The
gotta
reason
be from him going pop 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 pop.
the reason I ask is because to kind of give a different example of what we're talking about, when you're doing live sound, like at a concert venue where you have a lot of open area, one of the things that bodies will do is they will soak up low end. So
Yes.
you have to mix and push low end in the mix. So when you're doing the sound check when there's no crowd there, it's going to be you have to make it a lot boomier and more low end because you're compensating for what's going to happen when there's a crowd. You can't be remixing it in front of the crowd. You want it dialed in, so you have to push more low end because the blend of everything when what finally comes out, that's going to be a lot different. So that's really what they're doing is they're compensating for the blend of it. But it's just fascinating to me how it sounds individual. Of all the episodes you've done, I think that was one of the most shocking to me because I just did not expect that sound to be coming out of the bass.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the song. This is an epic one for sure. Here it is, Burn by Deep Purple. First of all, I mean, right off the bat, that is such a killer riff and a perfect tempo.
Yes. I always wish I could have experienced this like live in the moment when it was released because I feel like if anyone had any doubts of how this band could carry on without Gillan and Glover, I think they were erased within 2 seconds of of that opening. Of course, you haven't heard the vocals yet, but you're just like, wow, well, they're not holding back. This is just such a great driving riff.
Yeah, I remember, I'd forgotten to mention this. I remember when we saw Deep Purple in August, it was, I think, the second night when we were in Chicago, we were talking with Roger, and I asked him if it was weird to have to learn this song because he was, this is the first album that came out after he was kind of forced out of the band. And
Mhm.
he they didn't really do any Deep Purple songs in Rainbow that he wouldn't have had to learn, because I don't think they weren't doing Mistreated during the Down to Earth era. I don't think,
I
even
don't think so.
though that's what Graham auditioned with, was Mistreated. Um, I don't think he had to learn anything weird. So you get to Slaves and Masters, and they're doing the tour, and they start doing Burn. So now Roger's kind of being forced into playing a song that might be something that would kind of, touch on a couple of feelings. And he did say, yes, it was weird to have to learn that, and certainly understandable.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But interesting too is that as driving as this song is, Ian Pace is playing on the hi hat here is really interesting, because he's not doing eighth notes, he's not doing sixteenths on the hi hat to keep that motion. He's just playing half notes with a very open
Yeah.
hi hat, and it kind of makes sense because all the energy he has to exert during the song, to kind of lay back a little bit here and just play the tempo, gives him kind of maybe the room to be able to do all these fills and then not have to come back to this beat and then be 1,000 miles an hour on the beat too. So I wonder if that was part strategic.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah. But in any case, it sounds good. The song is just rich and full. It's wall to wall sound right off the bat, just coming out on fire. And again, short intro and right into the vocals.
Yep.
The sky is red, I don't understand. I've been honest to see the land. People are saying the woman is dead. She makes the burn with a wave of her hand.
Now, the main riff is repeated a lot in this song, and maybe it's just because it's short, or maybe because it's just so much fun, but I don't get sick of it.
No, it's great. And I still don't really figure it out, because between this and live, he doesn't always play it exactly the same.
Mm.
Sometimes it's da 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 da, and sometimes it's da 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 da.
Mm.
But it doesn't seem to have a, unless I'm just totally missing something, it doesn't seem to have a pattern for when it does and when it doesn't do the da da. It's just
Right, yeah.
and the same thing live, where maybe it makes sense to Richie, or maybe there's just some part of the repetition that I'm missing on. It's a very simple thing, but I never really quite grasped when or why he does it and why he doesn't.
It must have been planned, though, because isn't John's following him during that, isn't he? Or is he not? We'll have to see.
Maybe, yeah. It's something I always think about when I listen to the song, but then I never stop and say, I'm going to listen and see if I can figure out when it happens and when it doesn't. Because I've heard him play it live where he goes, da na 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 na, da na 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 na, the first time. But he doesn't do that on the record the first time. He goes, da da.
Right.
So, I don't know.
All right, I'm making an Excel.
He's feeling in the moment or something. I don't know.
I'm making an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah. Yeah, or just do a bonus episode where you try to tally which ones he does and which ones he doesn't.
That I wouldn't put it past me.
No, I wouldn't either.
It's a blaze, stars on fire. Woman's flame for reaching higher. We want fools, we call it liar. All I hear is
The vocal combination of these two guys, especially the layering that they do right there. I don't know how many tracks of Glenn and how many tracks of David we're getting here, but that is just such a heavenly sound to me.
It gives me goosebumps. And when we did the isolated tracks on this, like I legitimately literally had goosebumps listening to the two of them singing together isolated. I feel like there's certain bands and certain combos of singers, John Lennon and Paul McCartney, Coverdale and Hughes, Simon and Garfunkel, whatever it is, where there's something about the sounds of the two voices together and what they're singing, that just cannot be duplicated. You couldn't put two other singers singing the exact thing together. It wouldn't sound the same. It's just, there's something magical about these two guys singing together.
And yet, I don't know about you, but I don't think I would have ever put them together. If you'd given me a list of 20 singers and these two were on it and said, pick, I'm going to reach out because I want to do a song. I'm going to reach out. Who do you think would do the best harmonies together? I don't think I would have ever picked these two to be on a song together. And look at what we get.
Yeah, I think it's because their voices are so different. The timbre of them is so different. You've got the gruff, lowish Coverdale voice with the super smooth, polished, higher Hughes voice, and it works so well together.
It
And it
really
like again,
does.
like you listen to this, and there's just no doubt about who you're listening to. Another one
Mhm.
that I'm not as big into the band, but like if you hear Jerry Cantrell and Lane Staley sing together, it's like that's Alice in Chains. You can't duplicate how those two voices. And you could
Yeah.
say the same is true of any two voices, right? But
Mhm.
there's something about the chemistry between those voices. It's something you. If they wanted to continue on in this direction, say one or two of them left the band and they continued, and there wasn't a break between 76 and 84. Uh, who would you get to replace either of them? It wouldn't work.
Right. And you gave some great examples. I mean, if you think about Simon and Garfunkel, Homeward Bound, or you
Mhm.
think about the Beatles, like the two of us from Let It Be, just such a
Oh
great
yeah,
sound of
yeah.
those guys singing together. That's one of my favorite Beatles songs, but yeah, there's just some blends that are just so perfect, you know?
It's just pure chemistry. And the
Yeah.
same thing can be said of the the instrumentation too. There's certain
Mhm.
drummers and bass players that lock in a certain way, and I mean, obviously, all of those factors go into what you like or don't like about a sound for a
Right.
particular band or piece of music. But
Mhm.
um, yeah, I guess you could say the same thing about any collection of singers. But to me, this is in there with those other duos that I have mentioned. And to me, it's a small handful of singers that fall into that category where what they created was so special.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Also, the amount of reverb that's on their vocals when you get a little moment of almost isolation, like "Still I Hear," and then the music stops behind them, and you hear the reverb tail. There's actually a lot of reverb on there, but it could just be on those spots because I don't think there's as much during the vocal. It doesn't sound incredibly reverbed out. But I think during those specific spots, we're getting a good amount of reverb there. And then when they say "burn together," certainly heightened with reverb, but the sound is like it's just so beautiful. You don't really need to do anything with it except blend it into the song.
Yeah, and I think there's with Gillan, he was doing this by himself,
Mhm.
sometimes layering vocals, but often not. And for something like that burn part, like if he was to hold that note burn, he could do whatever he wanted. But when you've got two vocalists holding a note like that, having to keep the harmony going and
Mhm.
know when to end at the exact same time, it takes a little more. I guess choreography is the wrong word because they're not dancing, but
Well,
a little
it's
more.
like a like almost like a syncopation where they're focused on where they need to do the inflections, where they need to put the vibrato, the start and stop time. I mean, it's just so perfectly lined up. And yeah, you're
They
right.
have to know
And
what the count is,
mhm,
whereas
exactly.
Gillen could just be like, "Well, when I stop," and
Right. And it's also
it's not
because
gonna.
they're doing multiple layers each. It's not just like they walk in, they're singing at one time and stopping. There's got to be at least two or three takes each to get that blend. And
Yeah,
to do it that precisely every time because I'm not hearing anything stop later than anything else. There's not like one track where it's slightly off from the others. I mean, it's really on time.
yeah, and if you've got two vocalists holding a note and one stops before the others, it's not a good sound. So
Yeah,
they have to be on top of it.
right,
It
exactly.
sounds really sloppy, and it's not even just a matter of saying, "Oh, well, we're just being freeform." It just doesn't really work. So
Mhm.
they have to be nailing it together.
And we should point out that while Richie's only really written a couple of lyrics, and interestingly, the chorus of Space Truckin' was one of them, which don't necessarily think is a
Huh?
great lyric, but he was pleased that Ian liked it. The concept of this, while the lyrics came from David and maybe some from Glenn, the concept actually came from Richie. Richie said, "I want to write a song about this," and David's like, "Okay." So not
And
David's wheelhouse lyrically, but
yeah,
it came out great.
and I think he said he wrote like 4 sets of lyrics for it to see if he could get something that Richie liked,
Mhm.
and famously said, "I don't know how to write a song about a witch because I've never fucked one."
which is which
Which is
explains the entire band of Whitesnake.
yes, which is why he doesn't write songs about witches ever again. It's just
That's right.
about women and you know what.
Getting laid and the occasional song about the wayward traveler hoping to get laid.
Yeah, it's the undercurrent is that clearly
Right.
that hobo wants to get laid. I mean, what hobo wouldn't?
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't believe she was devil's sprung. She said, "Curse your war, you'll never learn. When I leave, there's no return." The people laughed, so she said, "Burn." Wanting
He still got the word sperm in there though, so it's
Of course,
like,
yeah.
it's
I mean, he
close
made that
as
happen.
he had
Which
to
I
do
feel
that.
like he never did again. He didn't do that in Whitesnake. He never
Yeah.
mentioned sperm. I mean, not directly.
Right, right. They're just kind
He
of
was
like
a little more metaphorical about it.
yeah, they're just kind of the background character in the story.
came, no one cared. Earth was shaking, we started there. When it came, none was spared. Still I
Thinking about them doing this live, and I have heard a number of versions of it. It's I have to give even more credit to Glenn because holding that note and still playing what he's playing behind it is pretty awesome.
Yeah, just such a generational talent as far as being a vocalist. I mean, everyone in this band is, but Hughes is on a level that very few people are on, just with how much power and range and precision he has in his vocals. It's truly remarkable. And you've got to figure, I mean, the first time I'm 95% certain the first time I heard this was seeing it in the California Jam.
Oh,
And imagine how many people in that audience were in the same boat hearing that. Well, I mean, when did this album come out? It must have
75?
74,
74,
but
yeah.
the California Jam was April. I don't know that it had either just come out or was coming out right after. Whatever it was, I'd have to look up. I think it came out in March, but
Okay.
probably 90% of that audience, if not more, this was their first time hearing the song.
Right.
So you're hearing this, and for the people being close enough, lucky enough to see this band doing it, like, and the people that watched it on TV, the same thing. They're seeing this new lineup and they're just being like, "Wow, this is like not Deep Purple, but it also is like this is crazy."
Well, and think about they had already been through almost all the bands in the show, which was a laundry list of people that performed that day. And so,
And
I
all
mean,
huge bands,
yeah.
like,
I mean,
the
Emerson, Lake and
Eagles,
Palmer
Black
steals
Sabbath.
Exactly.
I mean, Emerson, Lake and Palmer was the only band that went on after them, but all of the bands that went on before them were big bands for the most part.
Yeah, it was like the who's who at the time of big bands, and the ear fatigue, the exhaustion must have been huge.
Yeah.
And then Deep Purple comes out after an hour or so of nothing, and then they just explode on stage. And I mean, I can't imagine just being exhausted by the time they got out there and then being completely reinvigorated hearing this music performed.
Oh yeah.
But think about too the people that are like, yeah, I was at the California Jam. Oh yeah, how was it? I was like 200,000 people away from the stage.
It's probably from depending on where you were standing, you either had probably just your ears were just bleeding, or it was maybe just very echoey in the distance. I mean, who knows?
I can't imagine the sound was that great because they didn't have the speaker system to really, spotlight areas throughout the crowd. It was like the front of the house had sound and everything else would have been like that. Hey, somebody's playing a concert a couple of miles away and I can hear bits of it. It just couldn't have been great of an experience for everyone.
I'm sure it was a much better experience watching it on TV after the fact.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing I was thinking about, and if I ever get the chance to ask Richie, I would love to do it, but thinking about how much they had to pay for the camera that Richie destroyed, which was, I'm sure, more than they got paid to do the show. But
Mm.
and not to mention the fine for setting the place on fire. But why didn't the cameraman back off? Like, you've got a guy slamming a guitar into your $100,000 camera. Why are you just letting that happen?
Yeah, I don't know if he figured by that point it was like too late to really do anything about it. Or, like, because he's standing there, he's not knowing what this guy's gonna do, not thinking he's crazy enough to smash the camera. And once he smashes it once, he's like, oh, I guess this will be good TV.
Yeah, yeah. Kind of
I tried to reach out to the
gutsy guy.
cameraman years ago to get him on the show, but he never got back to me.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I have his contact somewhere, but I should try again. I mean, it would be a very short
Mhm.
talk. It wouldn't be a whole episode.
Right, yeah.
Like,
Yeah, other than that,
but there's
so
like things online that he's written about it, or like that people have chatted with him about it, or
Mhm.
something. So
wow, he's probably sick of talking about it because it was like such a one moment thing in his life, But
yeah,
for some people,
30
that's
seconds of his life.
that's all they get.
Yep.
So anyway, let's get back to the song because this song is just amazing, on fire, and
It's just starting up, and we haven't even
Yeah.
talked about the fact that Ian Pace basically just does a drum solo through the entire verse
yes,
of every verse,
yes.
and it's awesome.
And to think about the fact that he also does a drum solo in concert and they play this song. So he's basically getting two drum solos in, and the energy that, I mean,
Yep.
what is he, like 24 at this point, maybe 24, 25?
Yeah, 25.
Yeah.
No older than 25 or 26, I don't think.
Yeah. So still young and full of energy, but man, that's a lot to ask of somebody, to do a 20-minute drum solo on top of playing a song like this and Highway Star and everything else that they do. I mean, we didn't even have energy drinks back then.
Exactly. And he was actually, I'm sorry, he was 28.
Oh, 28. Wow.
So yeah, a little older.
Wow. Imagine, amazing.
Oh, wait,
they
wait,
did-
wait. I'm sorry, 26.
26. Okay. That's still youthful. Still, in playing the kind of stuff he was with the endless tours. I mean, he probably had to be in really good shape though.
Yeah, actually, I'm sorry, he would have been 25 because he hadn't yet. He would have been turning 26 very shortly after that. So
Okay. Yeah,
Math,
that
I'm
makes
very
sense.
good at it.
There's all those numbers and everything. It's like there's like too many of them. But yeah, so I mean, if you think about their extensive tour schedule and how he's playing almost every day, a full concert set, I mean that'll keep you in good shape. That's just doing a full workout every day, and that's with the drummer, you're working out your entire body. Both legs, both arms, your neck, your back, everything is getting a good workout.
And when he's not touring with Deep Purple, he's touring with his own band, Perpendicular. And I know a lot of those guys just have the same philosophies. Like, when we stop, we'll die.
Right.
And that's an extreme way of looking at it. But when we stop doing this and keeping ourselves fit and it's true for a lot of people that are at that age, you start to slow down. You lose some of your physical strength and ability. You lose some of your mental acuity if you're not having to do this sort of stuff and have all these interactions every day. So I mean, it's probably one of the healthiest things that these guys could be involved in doing.
Oh, absolutely. And mentally too, because music works so many mental muscles, and there's the concentration, the focus, and all that. So I mean, it's just such a great thing to do for your body. But they are not very heavily booked this year. And
Nope.
Simon McBride's going out on his own. So I hope Ian Pace is really keeping up with things. It seems like he would, because that's his nature. But in an interview recently, he talked about taking a month off and going to, I think they have a house in Mexico or something somewhere. And I'm like, this is very un-Ian Pace-like to take that much time away from the drums. So maybe
Right.
he's got a practice kit or something he'll bring with him so he can keep his chops up. It seems like that's probably something he would do, but I don't know.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah, we shall see. But he's full of energy on this one.
Yes.
You know we had no time. We could not even try. You know we had no time.
know what it is, but it seems like it started in Who Do We Think We Are and carried well through into Burn. But all of a sudden, this band loves the phaser sound.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, but to Glenn's vocals, like I remember that part where it changes. Like, oh, it's doing something different, and then you've got a completely different singer, and it's obvious. Sometimes those bands have two singers, and you don't even really pick up on it, but it's like this is obviously somebody else, and you're like, whoa, he's not just singing backups. He's like a truly amazing singer in his own right, and that's always just a sound that I've really loved is switching off vocals. So hearing that and hearing Glenn lend his own style to the song, wow! It's one of the few songs that I can really remember the first time I heard it. Pretty vividly, and like I said, even though I'm not 100% sure, I'm almost 100% sure it was during the California Jam. But I just remember all the feelings and thoughts I was having about the song and the arrangement and the dueling vocals, and just thinking it was incredible.
For me, it was going down to our local record store, Harmony House at the Macomb Mall, and my friends in Michigan know it well. And that was Harmony House was like right around the corner from one of the entrances. And I walked in. Every time I went into that store, from the time I discovered who Deep Purple was, went straight to Deep Purple. What do they have? Okay, there's Depeche Mode. Great, let's get past them. Let's get to Deep Purple. Deep Blue Something. Great, Deep Purple is right behind them. And what did they have? And they had gotten Burn in on import, and so I was like, done. That's my purchase for today. And I went home and I bought it, and I just fascinated with the album cover, because the album cover was amazing, and it's so much like the music on this album. It's very vibrant, and rich and colorful. And then you see it on the back where the candles have melted. They re-released those candles some years ago, the company that put them out. I was hoping they would do something for the 50th anniversary of Burn, but unfortunately nothing happened. But there was a small run of those candles. They were $150 a set, I think, and I just didn't have the money at the time to invest in them. But I really, really regret not just biting the bullet and finding a way to do it, because I would love to have had a set of those, and I cannot find them. Nobody has them available.
No, I'm sure they'll pop up on eBay eventually.
I'm hoping one of these days. I check every once in a while.
The hilarious thing is that it wasn't as iconic as it is. It wasn't even supposed to be the album cover. It was, a mock-up that I think Finn Costello, right?
I think so, yeah.
The one who shot it. He's like, oh yeah, I want to do something like this, and then like whatever, he was like, oh, they released it with that picture. I was just a mock-up. Like I had a better idea, like what I was going to do. I just wanted to see how they felt about this concept. And it's funny. They ran it. I think it was in Kerrang, like the picture that should have been the album cover. And I was like, I like the mock-up better too.
Yeah, it's funny.
But of course, it's because that's what you're used to,
Sure, but some of the discarded concepts are really funny. I think you mentioned on the Stormbringer episode that one of their concepts was going to be called Silence or Silent or something like that. And I'm like, not a good album title for a rock and roll band.
Oh yeah, they had some other title for it. Yeah, I'd have to go back in my notes and figure out what it was. Yeah, they had some completely different concept.
Yeah, I'm like anything that doesn't show like aggression, like Metallica would never put out like Baby Wipe. Would be a name of a Metallica album. It's got to be
anybody would put that out.
But you know what I mean? Like it's got to be aggressive and it's got to be metal and
gotta kick ass,
hardwired and song titles like that. Burn is a great title for a hard rock album.
Oh yeah, I'm looking at it now in my notes. It was going to be called Silence.
Silence, yeah,
based on the sign in the control room at the Musicland, and the cover was like a picture of this like woman like going shh, but she had like those. Those that makeup that makes your eyelashes look insane, like that would like go dancers and stuff would wear. Yeah, it's pretty terrible. Would be a terrible looking album cover.
And what was that episode 4 years ago?
Oh, 6.
See, I don't
episode
just
number 18.
I hear you, Nate.
And we just released 318 today.
That's right. That's right. An excellent episode on Rory Gallagher.
Ah, thank you. Yes.
with our
Mark Roback's been in hot demand for thoughts on
yes.
Rory Gallagher.
As we record this week, Mark and I have our third and possibly, but probably not, installment of the Rory Gallagher series coming out on the Haskincast podcast. For a guy I'd never even heard of, I'm still amazed how under the radar he was, considering how tied in he was to so many bands that we love. He toured with Uriah Heep. Graham Bonnet was inspired to write a song about him. I mean, geez, like, could he be any more in our face but invisible?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Absolutely amazing. But this song, to get back to this song, it's it's to think about, like what you were saying, people hearing Mark III for the first time, and if their album was the first experience, like it was with me, just being blown away by, my God, who are these guys, and what is this direction they've taken now with these new guys, this new blood in the band. And certainly Richie's vision for getting a bass player who could sing, who could get some harmonies in there and give them a different sound, was spot on.
Mm-hmm. And
Not
he got sick of it about a year later.
Right. not that I don't think we're lacking anything in the Mark II era. It's just a different direction, but I think it works beautifully for what we're getting here. But I could see, and I'll mention this in a later episode that I've already recorded, but I could see for David Coverdale where this might be a little bit frustrating, because Glenn's got another function in the band. He's the bass player. He's a very active bass player too. A great replacement for Roger, who's a very active bass player. But to, take over so much of the vocals when that's the only thing David does, I guess I would feel a little put off like that. Like, I get it. He's a great singer, but I'm the singer of this band. I
think he was too young and new to I think he was just flying high in the moment, at least for the first couple, 2-3 years.
Yeah.
Just like, wow, this is such an amazing opportunity. Like, if he had been coming over from another huge band or something like that, I don't know that he, ego wise, he would have been able to accept it. But it seems like, but that being said, Hughes, who kind of thought he was going to be the only singer, and I feel like they both dealt with it very maturely and did a great part and worked well together and formed a friendship that lasts to this day, when it could have been either one of them or both of their egos getting in the way.
Right. Very true.
And again, Coverdale, I think, was too green and too probably appreciative of the opportunity to really even know any better. Whereas if that had happened, if he wasn't in charge of Whitesnake and that had happened 5 years into Whitesnake, he would have been like, go fuck yourself. I'm the singer.
Right. Yeah, he was very generous. He let some people sing some of the songs that he wasn't even on. True. And maybe learning this lesson early on, like it's about what's best for the band or what's best for the song. Maybe that really helped him. Yeah,
and Bernie and David together sound great. Bernie's another great singer in his own right. And not as, like technically virtuosic as Glenn, and certainly not as unrestrained, but a great singer.
Yeah, and I covered a 5 CD set released from Cherry Red Records on the Haskincast podcast of his stuff, and man, just unbelievably talented. But before we get back to the song real quick, we should touch on, since this is the first episode with Mark III, I have to say, I think that it's a very undertold story about how David got this job. He's working in a clothing store. He hears that Deep Purple, they're not finding a singer. They're actually starting to reach out to unknowns. They're going outside of the here's the people we know that could work. And they couldn't get Paul Rogers, who Richie wanted. Still don't know how that would have sounded, but I can't picture him doing Highway Star or Child in Time, for example. They would have had to modify their. I mean, Coverdale didn't do Child in Time, but I don't know how it would have worked with him. But so he sends in an audition tape, and he doesn't do an audition for Deep Purple. He finds some moldy, covered, drunken audition tape that he had laying around and sends it in to the biggest band in the world.
With a picture, not a headshot, but a picture of him in his Boy Scout uniform. Because that's the only picture he had around. Imagine that.
Yeah.
Like, This is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. This is the getting into the mid '70s. It's at best you could have at least taken a Polaroid
There's
that'll
something. Yeah,
develop
yeah.
in a few minutes and send it in. So I mean, the fact that they even took him seriously at all, and I
But you
remember,
wonder, did he even? He must have just been like, well, this. I'm just doing this just to do it. Like, there's no
yeah,
chance I'm gonna get it. Like
right,
that had to have
yeah,
been the thinking.
just
That's
just
why
to,
it's
just to say I
so.
didn't let the opportunity go.
Yeah, I sent in an audition tape, like something you'd be telling his kids 50 years later and laughing.
Yeah,
I sent it. Remember Deep Purple? I sent in an audition tape that yeah, I had my Boy Scout uniform because that's the only picture I had. Ha, ha, ha. Yeah,
right.
imagine if I had been in Deep Purple, that would have been hilarious.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, I sent in an audition tape. It's a tough racket. But the miracle of this is that he did something. There was something on the tape, and I remember an interview with Ian Pace where he said, "Yeah, it was mostly rubbish, but there's a couple minutes on there that were worth thinking that we had something to work with." And I think that the ear fatigue that they must have had from listening to tape after tape after tape to get something that was pretty shitty and yet find something of value in it, on top of the frustration, God, we're reaching out to unknowns now. How bad is this? Can we even go on? And I mean, just the number of elements when you really break it down and think about it, it's pretty amazing that this worked out and that he got the job. He was overweight, he was out of shape, he was wearing these thick glasses, all this stuff that they had to kind of work with him on to get him into a position to be able to be in the band and to perform at the peak level that they needed. I mean, everything was against him. And yet it just goes to show that there's no reason not to go for something. And everybody talks about Sylvester Stallone. That's such a well-known story about, how he fought for Rocky and everything he gave up to be in Rocky and all this. And I admire the hell out of him for that. But when I hear a story like this and I think about everything he overcame, not from fighting for it, really. I mean, part of it was just kind of dumb luck, but it just goes to show if there's something you want, there's no reason not to go for it, because the worst thing that's going to happen is it doesn't work out. And at least you can say, well, you know what? I put in some element of effort. I tried, I did what I could or whatever, and it wasn't meant to be. That's fine. But I just find such inspiration in the fact that he saw an opportunity, he went for it, and against all odds, and really all odds, it worked, and he got in this band and then turned this career into Whitesnake.
Yeah, and another band or another person listening to it have said, well, this is whatever, this is crap.
Yeah.
But obviously the guys in Deep Purple were smart enough and probably had the wisdom and the again, kind of lack of ego to say, well, there's something here I think that's really special. And clearly it paid off. I mean, he went on to be probably the most famous person in Deep Purple ever. So, I mean, they saw something in him that maybe he may not have seen in himself, but it wasn't like, it wasn't overlooked, and it wasn't something that, again, I think they had enough of a lack of ego enough to say, this is something that could work with us, even though on paper it seemed like a disaster.
Yeah, and the funny thing is when Ian Gillan was doing his solo tour for Gillan's Inn and he had the Smoke This contest where they gave you the backing track to Smoke on the Water and you could sing along on it, and if he picked you, you would get the chance to go up on stage in whatever city you could make the show. And you could sing on stage with Ian Gillan, a pretty amazing opportunity. And when I recorded my version, I recorded it over and over and over. And here's David Coverdale. I was like, there's a tape on the floor. I'll send this in.
Yeah.
Of course, he has a better voice than I do.
Brush some Cheeto crumbs off of it. Send it in.
And then he spends his life writing about his penis. Okay, before we get into Richie's solo, so I'm trying to track this a little bit. And I'm not finding any consistency on when he's playing the riff with John and when he's not, and the difference of what he's playing. They had to have worked that out to, because
I
they
would think
recorded
he
it
just
live.
did it 2 times there with just da-na-na-na, da-na-na-na-na.
Mhm.
So he did that 2 times in a row, and I don't know if that's because he's going into the solo. But again, I've seen him open the song doing that. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think when he's playing by himself, he can do whatever he wants. But when he's playing the second part with John, that had to be worked out. Otherwise, John wouldn't know. Or maybe what John plays allows Richie to play it either way, and he doesn't have to be dependent on knowing what Richie's going to do.
Could be.
Why is this so hard for two musicians to figure out?
I feel like if we made that instead of talking about random stuff and things, I think if we really sat down and listened, I think we could. We're smart enough to figure it out, but we just.
Yeah.
I feel like I always just get distracted with how good the song is, and I think there's better things in life.
That's true. Very true. Somebody out there will make a tracker of
yes.
it. Yeah. Now, Nate, you're a guitar player, and I'm not a guitar player. I know you're more of a bass player, but you play guitar. How hard is that solo to play? Because it sounds insane.
I mean, if you go online, you could probably find 4 million covers of this guitar solo. But I think with a lot of things that Richie does, to nail the feeling he's getting, that is basically impossible.
Mm-hmm.
He starts off with that typical, like what we've kind of coined as the Richie falling down the stairs part, like
Right.
like he does that kind of thing to start out. He does a bunch of standard, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way, just standard Richie-isms.
Mm-hmm.
And then goes into like the end part of the solo, which is fairly composed. He tends to go back to that one live. That it's kind of like that part in Highway Star, that part in Smoke on the Water, where it's one of few sections even of guitar solos where he does the same thing live. But yeah, I would say it's easy-ish if you're a fairly good guitar player to figure out the notes that he's playing, but to capture that essence of Richie, it's not possible.
I would agree with that. I think it's again the difference between like playing the notes on the page and playing the feel of the notes on the page. And I listened to that part where he's going like, and it just sounds like it, like picking that would be. And I when I sit down on a guitar, my pick just gets caught up between the two strings and falls out of my fingers. But like to play something like that just seems like that is so technically proficient. And it definitely feels comfortable for Richie to do, but it just feels like that would be very difficult. But then I can't play guitar, so.
Well, Richie does it in kind of a, again, not meant to sound derogatory, but kind of in a sloppy way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you, after this episode, just type in Burn guitar solo cover and pick any one at random, you'll hear people playing that part super clean. And Richie doesn't. It's because it always feels like he's feeling what he's playing rather than just playing what he's playing. And he doesn't usually nail it live, but in a way where he's, I don't know, where it just really works. He's one of a kind. And again, you'll hear other people hit those notes. And I'm not saying that I could even do that, but my picking hand is terrible. But it's actually, I find like that end part of the solo is probably the easiest part to learn and play.
Right. Yeah.
I feel like all the other stuff is harder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could go with that. And this next part we're going to get here, this Bach-esque part, is a pretty stunning moment in this song that I like that both solos go into this kind of as a here's the end of the solo motif that we're going to use.
Yeah.
It's a pretty cool concept. I'm getting two guitar tracks. I'm getting one in my left ear and then one a little further to the right or one in my right ear and one a little further to the left of center in my left ear. Are you getting that too? Well, through the
Yes.
Zoom feed, you're
Yeah.
probably not, but
Yeah, right. I'm remembering. But yeah, I believe he's playing he's matching John with the be-do-do, be-do-do, be-do, be-do-do, be-do-do, be-do, matching those notes. And then there's another one where he's kind of holding notes a little bit more.
The other thing I find really interesting is this is like the most laid back we're going to hear Glenn in the song because he's very active on bass in the song, but here he's really just playing the root, which is kind of surprising.
And almost whole notes. He might be playing half notes, but he's just like boom, boom, boom.
Right.
He's just doing that. And that's like you mentioned the Bach part. It invokes a Bach fugue, but it's not necessarily derivative of one.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's because I think what they're doing, and please bear with me because I'm not that kind of musician, but I think what he's doing is, and what Bach typically did in these fugues is the circle of fifths.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what they are doing as far as like the chord progression throughout this instrumental part goes.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously those arpeggiated notes.
Mm-hmm.
Bach wouldn't be quite as repetitive,
Right.
but it's I think that's what they're going for, and I know that Lord would frequently throw in Bachisms throughout his writing.
Oh yeah, and I don't know. I know he listened to a lot of Beethoven growing up, and I'm sure obviously if you're listening to Beethoven, you're probably listening to Bach as well. I don't know who all his classical influences were. I know Beethoven seemed to be the biggest of his influences from interviews, but you got to figure he studied a little Mozart, he studied a little Bach, and all those guys. But yeah, this is such just a beautifully written and performed part. I love the sound of it. I love the feel of it. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of the way they would perform that bit from the end of Mandrake Root live. So they do John solo comes first when they're doing it live, and then they do that ending part, and then they go into Richie solo, and then they end with that same part again. And it kind of reminds me of that, only the solos are flipped, and Richie's going first on this one.
Yep.
You know we had no time. We could not even try. You know we had no time.
That's a long time to sustain that kind of a note on vocals.
Unless you're Glenn Hughes.
Unless you're Glenn Hughes.
Probably very easy. Because, this is the only time he's ever sung it this way. Every other time he's been like, what? Like,
Yeah.
you'll never hear another recording of him singing it this way that I'm aware of. Maybe the
Right.
first time they played it live, but as far as at California Jam, just very shortly after recording this, he's already doing the high thing.
Mhm.
Now, when we come out of that part and go back to the riff, Richie does do the first time he plays it, he goes da na na na,
Mhm.
and then the second time he goes da na 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 na. So to me, in my mind, is always like he accidentally did that part because he thought it was leading into the solo.
Oh.
He forgot to do it the correct way, and they said, screw it, we don't need to fix it. And one of the things that I kind of always loved about it is and those you hear stuff like that in songs. You hear like the him flip the pickup selector on his guitar. When it's audible, and you can hear in Ode to G when they stop and there's like this little harmonic that rings out on Bolan's guitar, but it doesn't do it on any of the other ones. So, and you've talked about this a million times, and we've all talked about it, which is nowadays that probably would have just been corrected. Well, just put in one of the ones where he goes da na 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 na, and we'll cover it up, and no one will ever know, and it would be fine. But it's kind of that little human element is there, and it's cool to. There's nothing wrong with it. It makes it actually more interesting that it changes up.
That's why even when in my writing, which I mean, I write everything in MIDI, and some things I'll record live. Like a lot of times I'll record a bass track and that, but I never copy and paste because I want everything to be the performance it was when I played it. You know, and I want it to be a little bit more alive than just like, yes, it's technically perfect, but where's the heart in it? You know, I feel like we lose that when we try to perfect everything. But yeah, I realized too that what John's playing is he's holding that chord so Richie could play it either way and it wouldn't affect what John's doing.
Oh, okay. See, I was listening for Richie. You were listening for John.
But also coming out of that Bach-esque section and going into the main riff again, I love that slide that Richie does on the neck. And it just kind of reverb tails out into the ether. I love that sound.
Yep, it's great.
If you don't mind, I want to pick this apart just a little bit because there's something he does in the solo that I've heard him do before, and I don't know like the physical workings of it, but I absolutely love how he does it. Is he just kind of makes the organ disappear and come back with this ferocious, almost guttural sound that every time he does it, I'm like, that is one of the most amazing things I've ever heard. It gets me every time.
I mean, it's one of his signature moves, along with you can see him tipping the organ back and hear the tubes rattling at the end of it. But yeah, when he does that, and again, probably gonna not get the technical aspects of it right, but he usually leans like part of his arm on like a section of the keyboard, and then he's fiddling with something. So it's got to be some sort of like volume swell sort of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if the drawbars are involved. I'll never understand how drawbars work. But like he like leans on it, and so he must like turn the volume all the way down, leans on it, and then like slowly fades it back in. That's all I can think of how the mechanics of that work. I don't know.
They kind of work like tone knobs on a guitar. There's just a lot more settings and a lot more of them.
Yes.
So you have a lot of control over what you can do, but doing it in the moment, you know, while you're playing this incredible solo, which I don't know about you, this is one of my favorite John Lord solos. It's just explosive and energetic and passionate, and I think some of his best work.
I was thinking the exact same thing when he was playing it, but then I was also thinking, I feel this way every time I hear it. Well, this is one of my favorites, but it's one of my favorite songs. So by that respect, it's one of my favorite solos. But yeah, it's just, man, it's what he does here is great. And I love, we haven't gotten there yet, how he sort of carries it into the Bach section again, but by changing that section up so that it's not the same as the first time we heard it. The first time we hear it is kind of like a straight instrumental. Then the second time we hear it is with him doing what sounds like a synth, but I've often been wrong, kind of playing along with what he and Richie are doing.
I remember Don Airey talking about performing this song when they did it at, was it the John Lord tribute, I think.
Yes.
And he said that he had to write this out because he wanted to make sure he played it perfectly. And I mean, you know, I'm not a great sight reader. I have incredible respect for people that can do that because it's just not something that my brain has ever been able to do. And I mean, I can write what I hear, but to be able to read it and play it back at tempo is just not something I've ever been good at.
No.
And I watched Don play this, and it's absolutely incredible how well he did. But I love that he found this piece to be so important that he said, I need to play this right, and I'm going to go through that trouble. That shows that we're on to something.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So I'm going to play this next part, and then I'm going to go back and play something that is particularly special to me inside of it, because to
Yes.
me this is one of my favorite pieces of audio I have ever heard in my life. Jesus Christ.
Yes, I love that. The part where he goes up the octave. Whee!
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just such a great melody within the solo.
And the addition of the synthesizer behind this, almost that
Yes.
sine wave type sound is the icing on the cake of something that's already pretty incredible.
Yes. And it's a sine wave or a square lead. I don't know, because every time I seem to think that it ends up just being an organ or something else with a effect on it. But yeah, it does. I'd be surprised if that was not a Moog of some sort.
Yeah, I think it's either that or because I'm sure he had to have the ARP Odyssey by this point because he used it on A200, so it could be that too. But because this album is synthesizer experimental, John, as well, which is pretty nice. We get some interesting colors on this album. But this segment, I mean, it's so beautifully written and performed. I look at like the Highway Star solo, and I think it's pretty amazing. And watching him play it on the DVD that they put out when Roger was remixing Machine Head, and watching him actually play it was a pretty stellar moment. But hearing this, it's that to me times 10.
Yeah, this is the peak of this band just gelling together, and you can't. I mean, love Mark II, love Mark III, love thinking about what would all of these bits and pieces have sounded like if Gillan and Glover were still in the band.
Mhm.
Some of these things would have come to light, and this song would have been, I'm sure, totally different, but parts of it would have been together, and it probably would have been awesome in its own right. But it's like you can't help but wonder about all that, but also just think that this is them at their peak. They're just every single one of them is just firing on all cylinders.
Yeah.
Even in the control room, even with Martin Birch, it's just everything's just tops. It's great.
Absolutely. I'm going to go back and play a part because there's a certain just almost subtle that I didn't even notice it for a long time. There's this little bit of connective tissue that John plays. It's just this little da-da-da-da in between the two parts. And I'm going to go back and play that because I just think it deserves a little attention. I may have gone too far back, but I don't think we mind hearing. Right there. Just this da-da-da-da connecting that section together. And that to me is just one of the most amazing things, because to be playing this little trill in the middle of what he's already playing is just that's talent beyond reasonable talent,
Right. There's learning this part. Well, learning, he's writing it, but it's learning / writing it. And then there's the point where you're so comfortable playing it. It's so natural to you that you can just throw in a and not even think about it. You probably didn't even think about it. It's like, I'm just going to do something a little different on this take.
Yeah.
Or at this moment. And it's that's a level of musical IQ and just fluidity of playing and just comfort on your instrument and everything just put together. That's I mean, you have to be at John Lord's level to even be able to comprehend that.
And the funny thing is, when I've seen footage of him playing this live, it's not like he looks the slightest bit apprehensive or anything going into the solo. Like, all right, I gotta pull this off. It's just like, all right, here's what I'm doing next. it's so casual and relaxed. I mean, he's into it. He's like, really gelling with the song, and he's physically moving around and everything, but I don't see any you know anxiousness or anything about what he has to do. He just goes in and does it, and it's just something he does. And I listen to it, I'm like, this is just unbelievably amazing and so difficult. And he's just like, yeah, here's what I do.
Yeah, I mean, how long would it take you or I to learn? I mean, I'm not really a keyboard player. I can play. I understand the basics of the instrument, but how long would it take for me to learn something to that level that I could do that? Like, I'd need to quit my job, leave my family, hunker down for 8 hours a day, and maybe after a year I could pull off that little 4 seconds segment perfectly. But yeah, it's a different level.
Well, if you and John can bank a year of episodes and maybe get a cabin up north somewhere.
Exactly.
I actually have a very accurate MIDI file. There was a bunch of MIDI files. These are still available on the Highway Star in the MIDI archives that Gino Marchentz had gone in and done some of these songs in MIDI and done an amazing job. I mean, they're incredibly detailed. And I have the one from Burn, and I've actually sat down, like slowed it down to an incredibly low BPM and tried to play along with it and learn it. And it's just like, I'm not a sight reader. I can memorize a certain amount of things, but I mean, again, I could spend a lot of time doing it and eventually learn how to do it and play it. But there's really no value in me doing that other than to say, wow, I did that, and wonder what else I could have done with that time.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, the Highway Star is not only a relic from the days when the internet was just so fresh and new and exciting, but it's the absolute greatest repository for all things historical in Deep Purple. And just it takes you back to when the internet was fun. And it also it wasn't just Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and then that's it. There were all these great handcrafted sites that had all this great information and great writing on them and great stuff. Now, finding things is a little difficult because it grown so much over the years, and there's some dead links and things like that there's people's email addresses that don't exist anymore and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, if you want to find stuff, including those MIDIs, the Highway Star, there's no better place to go.
Yeah, I mean, if you type Deep Purple into Google right now, you'll get in probably 0.02 seconds, 1,975,000 hits. And, it's definitely a different world from back in the days of dial-up AOL and going to Best Buy and getting your free 16 hours for the month and, the things that we had to fight for back in the day. That now, I mean, we just always have it. It's just always there, and we don't even think about it. We just pay our monthly fee, and there it is. Like, literally, you had to go down to Best Buy and get an AOL disk, uninstall AOL, reinstall it, get your 16 hours. Like, it was, and then hope nobody picked up the phone while you were trying to check your email.
Yeah, exactly.
Good times. But anyway, I just had to point that part out because it to me is just like one of the greatest things I've ever heard. And every time I get so happy hearing this little bit of music and that just little connective tissue that he threw in there that I just think is so brilliant. Probably didn't even think about it. It just naturally came off of his fingers. And I'm looking at this going, my God, this is amazing. So anyway, Thanks for indulging me on that, Nate.
No, I'm indulged as well.
Even that part, I mean, just that run down the keyboard, and he's doing that on I'm guessing 2 different keyboards to get that sound. But
and it sounds like it's just chromatic.
Yeah. Or he could be using it on one keyboard and just using his hands, I guess, doing it chromatic. Yeah, probably doing that chromatically
we've seen him do that with both hands many times, where he just does this chromatic runs, and it's like, I say just chromatic as if it's do it at that speed. I don't think I could do that at 1/8 speed as fluidly as he does it at full speed.
I could program that at 1/8 speed.
Exactly. I think I could do that. I could probably program a MIDI and then speed it up even faster than he's playing.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah. Way to put yourself out there. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna call it. I could do that.
Right. Yeah, I could change the tempo in my digital audio workstation. Yeah.
I'll just string my BPMs up to like 400. Just blow the roof off.
And then I normally I don't think I would like this, but I love the way again it just goes back into the main riff again. Everybody's stopping. We're just getting Richie again. It's just like normally I think I would find this incredibly tedious, but I almost need a little bit of a breath after that explosive solo. I like that they did this in this song.
It's a great grounding point, and I mean it's just an amazing riff too. It's such a good riff. You know, Richie gets recognized for many great riffs. Not this one nearly as much as he should.
Yeah.
And it's just such a good riff. And yeah, it's just like, okay, we're done with that part. We're going to do this for a little bit. As a listener, you catch your breath, and then who knows what's going to happen next? Are we going to go into another solo section? Are we going to go to the verse? Are we going to go to the chorus and throw you off? Like, you just don't know.
Exactly.
I mean, I know, but
well, yeah,
know.
we do. But when you first hear it, yeah, you're just riding the roller coaster. And if I could say, any term I think to describe the song, I think roller coaster would probably be a pretty accurate description.
Yep.
I like the way he sings this, coming back and repeating the first verse. I like that he sings it differently, especially the line, "I don't understand." The way he says that is almost in frustration.
Yep.
The first time he's just telling you the story, like, here's what's going on. And this time he's like, look, I don't get this. And it really upsets me.
I think these lyrics, I love the lyrics of this song. I love the image that it conjures up. And I know it's kind of bridging the gap from Mark II to where he wants to go with the Rainbow and eventually reaches during Rising. And I know David Coverdale wasn't really wanting to do that, but I feel like he shows he does it really well. And it's nice to hear Coverdale singing about something other than his dick for 2 seconds.
Isn't
Sorry,
it?
you were taking a sip when I said that. But you know what I mean? Like it's cool to hear him singing a song that's a little more I don't know what the word is, but something that's a fictional characters and things like that. And I love Stormbringer for that reason too, the song and the album, but the song for it being like this kind of epic tale of this kind of like weird fantasy tale. And I know that's not necessarily Coverdale's thing, but I think they do it exceptionally well in this lineup.
I do too. And I like when he, I think he's a good lyricist. And I think when he departs from the love topic, songs like Blind Man or North Winds, for example, are just great songs that, he can write about other things. I think it's just not where his focus is, and that's fine, write about what you want to write about. But I kind of think about, and this is a crazy comparison, but bear with me. I think about a show like The Office, and I was a big fan of The Office, loved the show, listened to the podcasts that they do, and really enjoy it. But I think the mistake that they made is they had all these characters, and instead of focusing on Steve Carell, and I get that he was a big star, I get he's very talented, but he was so much in every episode that I got really sick of Michael Scott having to get involved in every little thing.
Yeah.
They could have done episodes about Kevin or about Creed or Meredith or, really done a variety of topics and kept the show fresh. And I mean, eventually it's got to stop. And they got 9 seasons out of it, which was great. But I just feel like instead of burning out one topic or having that one element that always has to be in there, they could have done something that was more of a variety, drag out the Jim Pam thing by having episodes that don't even address it. And they could have done that. And I kind of look at David the same way, instead of always writing about this one topic over and over and over again. Like, there's so much he could talk about, and he's shown that he has that skill and can do it and pull it off and make a great song. I feel like that was kind of for my taste, I would have rather seen him do that than just sing about the same thing over and over. And there's bands that make a great career out of it. The Scorpions are another band that's pretty much all their songs are about that, with the occasional departure, and it's worked for them. But for me, I just get really burnt out on the topic.
Yeah, it's a good. I didn't know where you're going with The Office, but interestingly enough, yesterday I was in the break room at work, and The Office was playing, and it was one of the like really later episodes, well after they jumped the shark.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I was thinking about them jumping the shark, but I wasn't thinking of it in the terms that you said. But it's a really good observation, which is there was a point where Michael Scott was not the main character when the show first started out.
Right.
Then they kind of made him the main character.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where it maybe suffered a little bit, where like you said, he's a great character and hilarious character. Just everyone knows he's like a character of everyone, of somebody that everybody knows, whether it was your boss or somebody you worked with or somebody you know in your personal life. Hopefully not that extreme, but everyone knows somebody that has those qualities, and that's I think why it resonated with people. But you don't necessarily want that to be the main character. When it's in the background, it's kind of like you appreciate it even more.
Mm-hmm.
And with so many other great characters, it would be great to focus on them as well. And the same is true of Coverdale and writing about his schwanz.
Right.
We get it. You're very horny.
Yeah.
To a point where you probably need some sort of medical or psychological intervention, but like doing a song like that, there's no problem with. But yeah, it gets a little old.
It's to the point where I wonder if Viagra is maybe made with Coverdale DNA in it.
It's not. I hope he's not asking his doctor if Viagra
right.
is right.
Yeah.
I don't think it is. I don't think it's right for him at all.
But like even the episode where they thought Kevin might have skin cancer was about Michael's birthday.
Hey, I think that was that the, oh no, it was something about him having diabetes.
Oh, that was Stanley.
Stanley. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, but they're like Kevin's worried he's got skin cancer and it's ruining Michael's birthday. That's the big takeaway you get from it. And I'm like, even that, like they could have had this episode about Kevin and or the one that started out with Kevin's chili. They could have done something with that. And but yeah, so I mean, it's just like you have something. It's great, but it's like you've got John Lord, you've got Richie Blackmore, but there's some songs that Richie Blackmore is barely noticeable on. I mean, even, some songs that you think are heavy guitar songs, you realize he's only popping in at certain points. And during the verse, he's just playing a simple rhythm. And even during Smoke on the Water, he's not a heavy piece of that song. He plays the riff, but in the solo, but during the verses, he's just going da 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 da. He's not doing flourishes or anything like that. So like you could find that blend of things. And I think that's what really works for Purple that bands nowadays are missing, because we don't have the keyboard in the bands being used like this. And so you're really just getting that one sound over and over and over again. And it's, there's a better dynamic in Purple because you have those options.
Yep.
Yeah. So
100%.
That's my long way of saying whatever I was trying to say.
And next week on the Dunder Mifflin podcast.
Right, yeah. Although I will say, when I listened to the audiobook of Jenna Fischer's The Actor's Guide, which is a great book, if you're an actor, a casting agent, even director should listen to that. It's a great book. It's narrated by Jenna. I was making cookies for my friend's Christmas party, and she was doing she was posting on Instagram about bread that she was baking. So I had posted a picture of me making the cookies and a picture of the audiobook cover that I was listening to her audiobook at the time, and she liked the post. And I thought, well, hey, that's nice. Cool. That's the closest connection I've ever had to The Office.
And probably ever will.
Although the theme that I wrote that they requested, they wanted people to write a song called Heartache in the Break Room based on one of the episodes. And I wrote a tune. I wrote some lyrics. I enlisted my friend Chandra Jefferson, who just started her own podcast. You guys should check that out, Sedona Backstage. And she sang on it for me, and I sent it over to them, and I don't think they ever played it. So there you go.
Nice.
Maybe if I was making bread. And back to the song. just have to talk about Glenn for a second because I love what he's playing behind this. I mean, he's
Bass. Yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing.
very colorful notes. I feel like that's something similar maybe to what Roger would have played if Roger would have written the bass part.
Yeah, I could see it. Yep.
You know, Glenn's a very colorful bass player. He gets a lot of knowledge, or a lot of people talk about his songwriting or the bands that he's in. I know he gets some credit as a bass player, but I think he gets more talk about his vocals and his songwriting than he does his bass. He is a damn good bass player.
Yeah, I just love how melodic that part is that he's playing behind the vocals.
Mm-hmm. I love that long cymbal decay at the end. It just kind of puts a nice final period on the song. Instead of fading out, I really like that they chose to end it.
Yeah, and I love that the ending is kind of like a little sloppy. You know, it
Mhm.
doesn't sound like anybody really planned it, or if they, obviously I don't think they intended to fade out because they have the bum bum bum
Mhm.
bum bum, that whole part. So clearly, and then they do the concert ending part. So clearly they weren't going to fade out, but it's just like everyone just kind of trails off, but it works so well. It doesn't sound, it sounds sloppy, but not in a bad way, just in a really like
Mhm.
cool way.
Yeah, and I'm trying to imagine. I mean, they recorded this at Clearwell Castle. They've got the Rolling Stones mobile and everything. And I'm just thinking the red light is on. Usually people are, a little more nervous, a little more guarded, and, at least on the first take. And I'm just thinking, look at what these guys are pulling off, knowing they're being recorded, knowing that this is going to be, scrutinized by the media. Hopefully Rolling Stone will just ignore that this album was created and won't write their typical hateful review of everything. And it's amazing what they, because you would expect something like this live, but in the studio this is a pretty amazing recording. The energy, the I mean, it just, there's guts in a take like this.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. It sounds great. Yeah. And it just, I don't want, I never thought about this when I was younger, but being the age that I am now, when I think about stuff like that, like what you just mentioned, like what they're up against in the media and blah, blah, blah. Sometimes I'm just like, were they too young to even realize or care? Because like, I don't think if I was 25, I don't think I would have cared.
Yeah.
Oh, the media, blah, blah, who cares? Like, but now I'd be like, oh, what are the media going to say? Like, I feel like there's a confidence that comes with lack of experience. Not that they
Yeah.
weren't experienced at this point. They were super young, but they had done so much. But I feel like you're almost like whenever I think of Roger having been in the band for a couple months and being on stage doing the concerto, like, holy crap, that's scary as hell. That's outside of his wheelhouse, unlike anything he'd ever done before. Like, how do you do that? But then my brain says, if I was 21, I would probably be like, oh yeah, fine, I'm doing a concerto with the Philharmonic. Like,
right. Yeah.
who cares?
Yeah.
Like, no big deal.
Never
And
thought
now
I'd be playing the Royal Albert
getting
Hall.
bricks. Yeah, exactly. It's just, yeah. So I wonder how much of it is that, or just the fact that they've never really, this is all they've ever really done. They didn't really have, like Roger Glover says, like he's never had a real job. So like I wonder if the part of that, I mean, Hughes was like what, 17 when Trapeze took off. So
Yeah.
I think if it's all you've ever known, you're just like, whatever.
That's very
Who
true.
cares
But
what Rolling Stone thinks.
and I think about David Coverdale walking out on stage for the first time to a crowd that liked the California Jam. And I mean, here he was just a few months ago selling clothing. And next thing you know, he's out there in front of, what do they estimate, between 300,000 and 450,000 people. Not that you can see it, but they flew in helicopters. So you know what you're getting into. You see that sea of people. Right. But I think about Main Japan, and I remember Roger saying, the first night we knew we were being recorded. So on stage, we're up there like four puppets, which is why the majority of it comes from the second night instead of that first concert,
Right.
because they were feeling that pressure. They were a little rigid. And so they had some elements of that, at least when they were being recorded, that, better not mess up. And we've got this pressure. And considering that, it's really amazing what these guys created in the studio. And I know that they didn't enjoy recording, so pretty amazing what these recordings actually hold in them when you think about it under that set of circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I just can't imagine what it would have been like for any of this. It's just,
Yeah.
like you said, you're going out there knowing you're recording. So obviously the first night is usually the worst, but
Mhm.
then you feel like, well, we got one recording of every song, so now we
Yeah.
can let loose a little bit, and then you feel a little bit more at ease.
Hmm.
So
Well, I think it was on the Infinite DVD where they had the documentary of the making of it. And I remember Bob Ezrin saying to Ian Pace, I don't remember which song it was. He goes, "Okay, you got your safety take where you played it
right.
safe. Now just go for it." Because, Bob's going to mix and match, and the takes we get aren't always the one take thing like we were getting back then. When I listened to this, they performed that. There might have been some overdubs. Obviously, we're getting a couple of tracks from Richie, so he's overdubbing some stuff. But they played that. That was the recording. And nowadays, it's like, well, they'll record it two or three times, and Bob will pick, okay, I like this fill better than that fill, so I'll use that one. And
Mhm.
you're not getting the same. I don't want to say it's not genuine, but I think there's a different energy and honesty to the recordings back then, because they sat down and just recorded that and that's what you got, versus it's still them performing it, but it's not that straight through one take type thing.
Yep.
you
Yeah.
know
And I think if you've ever, well, I know you have because everybody has, if you've ever lost something that you wrote or something that you recorded,
Mhm.
um, and it seems like it feels like a piece of your heart has just been ripped out of you, and um, it almost always can be recreated 10 times quicker than you thought it could ever be, and it's
Mhm.
almost always better.
Yeah. Well,
You're not in your own head about, I gotta record this again, and
mhm.
you've got the experience of having done it once already. You do
Right.
some things a little different. It almost always sounds better or reads better or whatever.
Hmm. And then you find out after all that it was just Disposable Heroes by Metallica.
Yes.
You've wasted your time twice.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be the best. Yeah. Now I
Yes.
recreated it. Thank God. My masterpiece. Oh no.
Or if you're like Richie, you're just like, hey, here's where I got the idea.
The idea. Here's where I got the idea for
Right,
Black Knight.
right, yeah. Well, before we wrap things up here, I do want to thank you, Nate, for the shout outs you guys give me on the Deep Purple podcast. I appreciate it. I mean, we've kind of been a bit of family for a few years now, and I've always enjoyed being on your show, having you guys on my show, and I love the back and forth that we have. I really appreciate the support that you guys have given me doing this show and coming on as guests. I also want to throw a shout out to you, and I'm going to put your Bandcamp page in the show notes because you got some fun stuff on your Bandcamp. Really love your 8-Bit Christmas album. I know that you've had the idea of doing one, so every year I pitch to you, please do another one this year. But I also understand how busy you are and everything else. But I really, every once in a while, I'll just go back and listen to that, even during the summer, when I'm walking to
Nice.
Walmart or wherever. And I just enjoy the hell out of that album.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and I've got the longer version up on YouTube that's been I put up there, and it's got a lot of views.
Really?
I was definitely not expecting it. Yeah, I don't want to click it now because otherwise it'll play.
Right.
But I know it's got a lot of views, and there's people that comment on it. It's like, oh, I would listen to this every year. It's like, wow. And one of the guy that created um the pack that I use that simulates the NES
Mhm.
sounds to make it. I've been in communication with him for years and years. I was actually on his podcast years and years ago. Um, the first year I put it out, he said he decorated the tree with it while listening to it with his wife, and I was like, oh wow, that's like the best compliment you could possibly get.
That's awesome.
It's that's something that you throw together, not thinking anything of at all, and a lot of people like all of a sudden like it and listen to it. And then they came out with the 8-Bit Christmas movie a few years later, and I was like, they stole my idea. But it's not at all my idea at all. And it's a great movie, so you should watch it. It's really good.
You sure you don't want to do like a 10-year lawsuit for intellectual infringement?
The only two things it has in common is it's called 8-Bit Christmas and it involves a Nintendo. And
there you go. Having done an album in 8-bit, I have to say it's a lot of fun to really get creative with those kind of sounds, because the sounds are really off the wall and could be very limiting, and you have to really get creative with how you use them. And I think about back in the 80s when we had those strings of lights that were like the red bells, and they played these god awful sounding Christmas tunes, and you just like you turn them on for about 10 seconds and you're like, that's enough.
Yep. It's cool to give yourself some sort of limitations when you're doing music these days, because there's really no limit to what you can do, what sounds you can have access to these days. So 30 years ago, you would get some piece of equipment and learn it and master it. And nowadays you're just like, whoa, what? There's no limit. It's astonishing how much free stuff there's out there.
Yeah.
And then if you want to pay money, forget it. Anything you want emulated, any sound you want, anything you can have. So it's very easy to get lost in all of that stuff. And doing something with just the 4 Nintendo sounds that they have, just it challenges you to be a little more creative with what you're doing.
And I'm not saying that I haven't bought a ton of stuff on Plugin Boutique or audiodeals.com just because it was $5 and I'm sure I'll use this for something one day. But I like to do that. I like to set every new project I do, I like to set some kind of challenge and do something different, whether it's a theme or a certain sound or, whatever it is I'm going for. I think it just makes it fun as a writer to find something to do that's a little bit different, instead of just writing song after song, which I could do and you could do, and they would be fine. But to find something to maybe push our creativity in a new direction or do something that we wouldn't normally do, just to see where it goes and explore it. I think that's one of the most enjoyable parts about being a writer.
Yes. And there was a long period of time where I was obsessed with getting every plugin and everything. Oh, this sounds so cool. And because they all make them all look so cool.
Yeah.
And then you realize after doing that for a while, like, I'm not actually making any music. I'm just collecting plugins. So you have to kind of dial back your process and say, well, what I'm going to do is make music with what I have already. And if something comes up that I just cannot, for whatever reason, accomplish, I'll seek something out. But it's been a whole paradigm shift from, starting in the late 90s to like the mid 2000s, that 10-year gap when everything went on to computers. And it's great. And it gives you so much more flexibility. And I would never want to record anything on tape ever again for any reason. But yeah, you have to, if you want to actually buckle down and get anything done, you have to just do it and not worry so much about every little detail that you can control now.
Yeah, I just finished up a film score, and it was a sci-fi. And I knew I had some certain sounds that, when I was looking at the film in my head, I'm like, oh, okay, I want to use this, and I would use that and use this effect and whatever. And I spent probably 10% of the production time just trying to locate the specific sounds that I was looking for, because I've got hundreds of thousands of sounds, and they aren't named in ways that make sense necessarily, like xenophobomorphia and all these things. Like
that's the other thing, is trying to find them.
Yeah. So I mean, I really do need to maybe just take a couple of days and just go through all my stuff and really catalog what each sound bank has that I can maybe reference somehow very quickly, because it was just such a waste of time. I'm like, I know I have these sounds, but I'm looking through my list. I'm like, why do I have so many of these things? Well, because they were $5, or it was free, or it had a bear on the interface, or like, I don't need that, but I really like the interface. I'm sure I'll use it for something. It's got a bear on it.
I got one. I think it was a compressor I think it was called like sausage fattener, and it's like this big hot dog looking thing.
I've seen that.
You know that one? Yeah, I
Uh-huh.
was like, this is just too cool. It's like the way I buy wine, like or beer. It's like, oh, what has the craziest label? Oh, I'll take it.
I'm a big fan of safari pedals because they're simple to use like guitar pedals, and they have like some sort of animal theme to each one, but they're very powerful, really versatile, really simple to use, pretty inexpensive. And I interviewed Noom, who's the guy that owns the company, really nice guy. So it's like the people that make them are cool, the product is cool, they're inexpensive. They're now kind of go-to plugins for me, and yeah, I really dig those. But yeah, I really need to just stop it.
Yep, we all do.
We all do. Well, Nate, thank you so much for joining me for this epic song. It was a great review. There's so many great parts. I mean, we could really nitpick every little thing, but there's so many great things to talk about. I'm really glad you picked this one to join me with, and can't wait for the next one.
Me too. I'm glad I picked this one, and I also can't wait for the next one.
And I'm sure at some point we'll get together on the Deep Purple podcast for another Blackmore's Night album or game show or something else. That's
Hopefully
always
sooner
fun.
than that.
Hopefully, yeah. Because what do we do, like every 2 years? I think is what we can get John to agree to.
Whatever the limit is to what he can tolerate.
We just need to send him some kind of wine or something that he'll, and then tell him what the episode is.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, you take care, my friend. Guys, check out the Deep Purple podcast. In the links, I will have, or in the show notes, I will have the links to the isolated tracks episode that they did for Burn, as well as Nate's Bandcamp. Go check out 8-Bit Christmas and some other stuff he's got up there. It's a lot of fun. Nate, thanks again for joining me. Thank you guys for listening. Let's see, what day is it that this is coming out? It is Tuesday. So yesterday we listened to Painted Horse, our last episode from Who Do We Think We Are, the one and only bonus track from that album. I had a lot of fun reviewing that. Tomorrow, let's see, Thursday, we will take on Might Just Take Your Life. Tomorrow is whatever the episode of the Haskincast podcast is, the episode of the Haskincast podcast. I had a boss that used to, every time I asked him something, he would say something like that. Like he would say, well, you need to go and get this code. And I would say, okay, who generates that code? And he would look at me, and because he didn't know the answer, he would say, the person that generates that code.
Yes. Well, it's correct.
And since I'm, recording this a month ahead, and I always change the episode at the last minute, I have no idea what it's going to be, but it'll be something. I guarantee you that. So you guys have a great day. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode of Deep Purple Smoke on the Podcast. Cheers. Thanks for listening to Deep Purple Smoke on the Podcast, a tour of the entire Deep Purple studio recordings. Please remember to give the show a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. Leave a comment and tell your friends. I also have a Patreon set up if you'd like to support the show. You can also write to me at smokeonthepodcast@gmail.com. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and thanks for listening.